refreshed for a rainy day.
Do I?
Yeah.
I feel so refreshed. Actually, I was just thinking, you know, sometimes you can't remember what you had like for breakfast even an hour later.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I wrote for my radar today, so I'll be finding out for the first time just alongside you.
And so will the audience. So what's on your radar?
Let's find out, shall we? The Democratic Shadow Cabinet. Ah, there it is. The Democratic Shadow Cabinet rises. I'm not sure this next one ranks in the pantheon of all-time bad ideas. It's much too trivial for that, but it was a big topic on social media yesterday, so let's get right to it. One mainstream media outlet, Politico, has a columnist who has proposed the Democrats convene a shadow cabinet to oppose Trump and his very real, non-shadowy cabinet. This shadow cabinet would have no real power, of course, so it's mostly just rhetorical opposition. Quote, it's a common feature of opposition politics abroad and could be a way for Democrats to flood the media zone and deliver a coordinated response to Trump's most wild maneuvers, writes Politico's Bill Scher, a liberal political writer. He notes that Democratic members of Congress serving as ranking members on various committees are in effect serving in such a role, but he thinks Democrats need public-facing cheerleaders and bomb throwers. Ranking members have their uses, they're good at reclaiming their time and making motions to recommit, but they are not the fresh faces who can give the Democratic Party a sleek, new look, he writes. So, who are these fresh, sleek faces the Democrats should center as their opposition leaders? Well, Politico did put forward a bunch of names that range from familiar and tired to unknown and pointless to weird stunt casting. If this is really the best you got, Team Blue is doomed. So here we go. Samantha Power for Secretary of State, General Charles Brown for Secretary of Defense, John Tester for Secretary of the Interior, Letitia James for Attorney General, Lena Khan for Secretary of the Treasury, John Boyd for Secretary of Agriculture, Governor Josh Green for HHS, and let's actually take a break there for a minute, because who are these people? Now, some of those names probably are familiar to you. I knew most of them. I didn't know all of them. Some are well-known, like Samantha Power and Letitia James, and are incredibly controversial. Are they the fresh new faces of the Democratic Party? Really? Actually, the wish list did have precisely two names that make sense for these jobs, if the job is to call attention to what a Democratic cabinet would do instead of a Trump cabinet. The two arguably smart choices are Jon Stewart for Veterans Affairs and Mark Cuban for Secretary of Commerce. Stewart and Cuban, unlike most of the other people on the list, are actual professional entertainers who are good at talking to people and blasting out a message on social media, on TV and podcasts, etc. They can get a message out, and they have built-in audiences who are not already converted to the Democratic cause, so that does make a certain amount of sense. I mean, just look at what Trump's done. His cabinet is disproportionately staffed by media figures and stars from conservative television. Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Sean Duffy, and others. Trump understands, I guess better than Democrats do, it's not enough to have the right ideas. You have to know how to sell them to voters and to viewers. Looks like the Democrats are, I think, still figuring that out. As Sean Spicer said in reference to this wish list, if this is the best Democrats can do, we are in good shape. But we have to talk about, by far, the strangest name on the list. Giselle Fetterman, wife of U.S. Senator John Fetterman, who Politico is recommending for Homeland Security, despite her having no relevant experience whatsoever, as far as I can tell. Write to me if I'm somehow wrong about that. Politico writes, Senator John Fetterman has become a highly controversial figure in the Democratic Party. His militaristic commentary in defense of Israel has alienated progressives. Leaks from former staffers have raised concerns about whether he's fit to serve in the wake of an extended hospital stay to relieve acute depression, but his wife, Giselle Fetterman, has none of the baggage and is a compelling figure in her own right. End quote. Imagine thinking that Giselle Fetterman is a better political operator than John Fetterman. Look, I know leftist Democrats don't like to hear this, but Fetterman has become more popular in his home state of Pennsylvania by adopting all those moderate stances that so infuriate progressives. Not less popular, more popular. This makes me think that if Democrats actually did have a charismatic, well-liked national figure who can speak to large, moderate audiences, perhaps even winning back alienated identity groups, a la the liberal Joe Rogan we keep talking so much about, they would probably ignore that person. In fact, someone in the mainstream media would probably have the bright idea, I guess, to give that job to the person's much more liberal wife. Good luck, guys. So did you see this list yesterday?
I did. I loved it. Brilliant. I thought that it was funny. You said this is a shadow cabinet, but Trump's cabinet is actually very shadowy with figures that have no relevant experience, just like Fetterman's wife. He filed it and listed it with people that just haven't done any jobs like this besides talk on TV so they can schmooze and talk a good game. I think this is a great strategy. I talk about first steps and not kind of just relying on the criticizing Trump of it all to be your solution. And this is actually a solution that puts people in places, like you said, Mark Cuban, like Letitia James, that have actually gone up against Trump and will provide a response, like you mentioned in the article, daily, that actually combats and gives Democrats something to lean on as opposed to people just being silent. People are confused. Where are you? How are you fighting back against Trump? Are you just going to lay down and say, okay, whatever he wants to do? Like, people have been confused about where everyone who was complaining the entire election season has been. And so this is one strategy. I don't agree with all the names, obviously, but I think it's a step in the right a direction of also putting people, like you said, you don't know their names. So maybe we're actually putting qualified people that have interesting backgrounds and experiences as opposed to celebrities in positions of power. And that might be actually a good thing, a great thing towards progressing the country. And accountability happens through visibility. So when we're seeing these people and they're holding Trump accountable and we have all these different people out here that can call to attention a variety of different issues, I think that makes us all better. This is one plan, and I'm happy to see a plan from somebody that's not even particularly in the Democratic Party, an opinion writer, showing the way for what a solution may look like or start to look like.
Put Giselle Fetterman in charge.
No, I don't agree with.
Security.
I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with everything.
Do you see how that speaks to my point? Like, what liberal brain thinking that Giselle Fetterman would be a better look? I know people on the left don't like him, but he's a popular senator in a swing state. He might actually be too physically incapacitated to serve. I'm not even arguing that. But to think you would swap one for the other, it's just like more liberal, more woke, more of that kind of thing. That's how many times does that have to be rejected by the people before Democratic operatives, or as you say in this case, yes, it's just a liberal journalist, before they realize that's not the solution?
I would have added other people to the list. I definitely would not have skipped over Stacey Abrams, who's been extremely effective in campaigning.
Stacey Abrams.
Yes, I definitely would have added her to the list.
Isn't she? I thought election denial was disqualifying offense.
No, I think that Stacey Abrams has done a lot to galvanize the grassroots vote. We've seen what she's done in past elections, even though she didn't win her own elections.
We'll try to tell her that.
Well, we know.
She doesn't react well to being told that.
We know that she has the staying power of somebody that belongs in the Democratic Party. You don't make parties up of people who haven't been there before and don't understand the lay of the land. We would have 10 Elon Musks in office, which we saw was an absolute disaster.
I wish we had 100. I wish we had 100 Elon Musks in office.
That's ridiculous. He did nothing but create a lot of chaos for many people and didn't really put a major dent in how much we're spending.
Well, I think that is unfortunate. Actually,
it's very unfortunate.
Elon Musk agrees with that, has been tweeting a little passive-aggressively lately, doing a lot of replies saying, yeah, I tried to reduce spending and it's impossible and they stopped me and the Republicans won't vote to actually do it and it's very disheartening. And I feel that, man.
Yeah, as coming in here as probably the most powerful outsider and leaving with your tail tucked between your legs is not something that...
I don't know if he's leaving with his tail tucked.
I think so. He's just in higher level conversations now.
If the richest and smartest person in the world can't even stop, stops like a sliver of reckless government spending, it's not a lot.
Well, I don't think it's reckless.
Despair given to our despair.
USAID and people across the world. I don't think it's reckless.
Yeah,
but when somebody has no comprehension about how government works and just thinks they can run the government like a business, which it is not a private business, that's where you come into issues like we did with Elon Musk and Doge. But we'll still reap the benefits of his bad decisions for years to come. Well, coming up next, RFK Jr. cuts COVID vaccine recommendations for healthy pregnant women and children, a move that's caused swift backlash. That's next.
Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie praised Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s move to remove the COVID-19 shot from the vaccine recommendation schedule for healthy children and pregnant women. Taking to X, Massie posted, quote, "This is a great first step. Millions of children will now be spared the known and unknown side effects of the COVID shots. CDC and FDA have been using your tax dollars to be liability-free, science-ignoring, fact-free marketing agents for vaccine manufacturers."
The Health and Human Services Director made the announcement Tuesday with the NIH Chief Jay Bhattacharya and FDA Commissioner Marty Makary in tow, saying, oh, let's take a look.
Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention normally decides who should get the shots, but it currently has no director. So while critics of the CDC and pharmaceutical industry were very pleased about the news, some of RFK Jr.'s opponents assert that he was breaking a promise he made during his confirmation hearings, that he would not take away someone's vaccine.
Well, I am, as you can probably guess, thrilled by this news. This is great and perfectly consistent with the science, which is that their otherwise healthy children do not need the COVID vaccine. You can get it if you want, but it's not a recommended thing. I saw a lot of people screaming about this online, saying, oh no, anti-science stuff is taking over. They probably don't know that this is consistent with what many European countries do, Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, and others, similarly stopped recommending the COVID vaccine for otherwise healthy young people. They don't need it. You can still get it. It's not banned. This actually has to do, the vaccine schedule recommendation thing has to do with what is covered under liability. So if you had an adverse reaction, could you sue the vaccine manufacturer if it's on the schedule? This is my understanding. You can't, basically. So this is, I think even some people on the left should want more, not that I'm claiming the vaccines are unsafe or something, but in the case of an adverse reaction, they certainly can be unsafe in some circumstances. Should you be able to get some accountability for the vaccine manufacturer, that can only happen if they're not on the schedule. And again, this is just for otherwise healthy children, pregnant women, perfectly consistent with the science. So what's the big deal? Why are people shrieking on social media, Lindsay?
Kind of like the first conversation that we had, hiring your friends. This is where it goes wrong. RFK Jr. is not a public health expert. He has an opinion about vaccines, which is very skeptical, as we all know, when he came in this position. And this is his ideology, not science. I like to go off of numbers. So vaccines work. More than 1 million children have developed long COVID. Vaccines protect from that. The CDC shows that 2 or more doses of this vaccine were 40% effective. So even if 40% is not a good enough number, isn't that enough that a lot of kids are being protected? And also, if kids recover quickly and don't need it because they're healthy, passing it to their elderly family members is not a great thing and could create real problems in those older people, which is why we want to vaccinate the kids.
But it doesn't stop you from passing it.
I know, but we want to protect people from getting it, and then they won't pass it along.
Protect you from getting it either.
I know, but if you have the vaccine, you're less likely probably to attract
less
COVID.
likely, probably. Again, these are not
Again,
proven. These are not demonstrated scientific facts.
No, these are actual numbers. 40% effective at preventing emergency room visits. So if you get it,
that's different.
If you
that's
get it,
the exact,
you won't be in ER.
You just did the bait and switch. Yes, vaccines do significantly reduce serious adverse risks of COVID.
So, but don't parents want that for their children?
No, because the children aren't at serious risk anyway. That's the difference. If you're older, if you're immunocompromised, if you're in a risk category for COVID, you should get the vaccine because it will reduce the likelihood of, yes, an emergency room visit. But the statistical likelihood of a healthy young person being admitted to the emergency room because of COVID is so close to zero, there's no reason to get the COVID shot. Doctors don't just give you things that are not necessary. Like, doctors aren't pumping us full of antibiotics at all times because, well, you could get some kind of infection. Like, we don't give things to people needlessly. We give things to people if there's a medical reason. There is not a medical reason, not a necessity, to give this shot, to give multiple booster shots to otherwise healthy young people. There just isn't.
People are still dying from COVID every day.
Not
people
kids,
still,
not young people.
Yeah, but people in general in America.
Well, and they should get old people, and they should get the COVID shot.
You should make that decision when you're in an emergency situation. And so if you're going to be around your grandparents, then the idea is
your grandparents should get it, not you.
No, the idea is that you protect yourself and them.
But it
We're
doesn't
just
work
being-
like that.
No, that's the idea of public health research and why the CDC generally has meetings about
No
this.
evidence has
Wait,
produced that works.
Let me finish. The CDC generally has meetings about this where they would decide something like this and they would go to a vote and they would come out with their decision. What RFK has done is skip that entire process and just come out with his decision, and he is not a doctor. And so that's my problem. I want real science-based recommendations from actual people who are doctors or have researched this, especially when I think about my kid and what
Do you
is
think
best for her.
Finland, Sweden, and Germany are not making
Well, we don't
doctor-informed
Does the U.S.
decisions?
follow other countries? You argue that we shouldn't in some cases, and now we should follow what they're doing. Like,
No, I'm
we're
with
supposed to
Europe.
lead
I
and
think we
do
should
our
be
thing.
more like Europe, which has a far more sane COVID approach than we do.
Well, I want to protect children, and I want to make sure that if they can get a vaccine and it could stop them from having long COVID, possible
It doesn't-
emergency room visits, brain fog, fatigue, these are all things that can come from catching COVID once. This will stop
First
them
of all,
from-
those things are highly scientifically debated about how real they are.
among
how-
scientists at least. Not
About-
RFK shouldn't
about
be just
everyone.
debating about
I am highly skeptical of some of the most extreme long COVID claims. They are very contentious and not poorly.
There are
sort of
real people
brain
that we
fog.
both know that have
No.
long COVID.
Well, they're lying, but there are lingering respiratory symptoms. Certainly can be the case for people recovering from COVID or any other disease. Some of these symptoms they're describing seem clearly psychological to me, having more to do with the effects of the lockdowns. When they studied this, they studied long COVID in the initial study that did it. Then later they looked back and those people didn't even have COVID, and they were all claiming they had long COVID-like symptoms. People exaggerate their physical health, their mental health, and yes, you can obviously have ongoing complications for any kind of disease. But the greater fiction is pretending that this is helpful in any of those cases. It's not.
Well, I just think we should leave it up to a board of certified experts to have a conversation about what the best next steps for our country are, and not just RFK.
What if the experts are all
No,
have
they
a
can't be
financial
tasked with a wide.
No, what if they have a
net.
financial incentive to give greater legal protection to Pfizer and Moderna?
Well, then we should have a different conversation. I'm definitely
that's-
not
I mean,
for
that's
protecting
why we're-
big medical.
But that's what the vaccine schedule does.
No, but I think
protects
that
them.
it also protects children, and so that's a real conversation. I just want an expert making a recommendation, and I would trust that we can try to come up with the WHO, CDC, and not just RFK, right? I know they all have 3 letters in them, but I want to trust those two former instead of the latter.
You don't trust RFK Jr., but what if an expert, if someone put on an expert hat and they said to you, yeah, an otherwise healthy 13-year-old boy does not need to get a COVID booster, would you accept that from the expert?
I would accept that from my
is
child.
I'm
my
telling you,
child's
that
doctor.
is the expert
Well,
consensus.
the pediatricians were recommending the same thing. So now it's up to them to decide if they want to recommend it to parents or follow the CDC's guidelines. And so they're in like this tight spot where I know, as somebody who was pregnant and had a baby that had these options, it was highly recommended by the pediatrician and my doctor, my OBGYN. So that's kind of like, I think she based it off research. I trust her. She did it herself. And so I'm trusting people like that often follow
I'm not saying
CDC
don't trust your
guidelines.
doctor. If your doctor might know some circumstance that is not broadly applicable, they might say, you should get it or what. It's not trying to. Every circumstance is different. I'm not saying there's no circumstance by which a pregnant person or a young person should get the vaccine or different. Every person is different, but as generally applicable rule, it's not harmful, but it's not necessary, and we don't do things that are unnecessary for people in a medical sense. Is a general recommendation.
I think we're going to keep talking about this. No one's going to let it go.
Harmless chant or a call for genocide? What South African leadership and President Trump are saying about kill the Boer? That's next.
farmer, kill the brewer, the farmer.
Footage there from that tense Oval Office meeting between President Trump and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, showing the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Party in South Africa chanting, quote, "Kill the Boer, the farmer." President Trump is now calling on President Ramaphosa to arrest EFF leaders, saying that chant is a call to violence amid an alleged Afrikaner genocide.
But South African leaders are pushing back. President Ramaphosa saying that the chant dates back to anti-apartheid movement and he would not be making any arrests at the request of Donald Trump. Take a look.
To the issues of arresting anyone for any slogan, that is a sovereign issue. It's not a matter where we need to be instructed by anyone that go and arrest this one. Kill the Boer, kill the farmer is a liberation chant and slogan, and it's not meant to be a message that elicits or calls upon anyone to go and be killed.
Anti-apartheid veteran, former South African President Thabo Mbeki also pushed back on the idea that the chant calls for violence against Afrikaners. Take a look.
I mean, that thing is a chant. It's a chant. It was a chant during the days of struggle. And chants of that kind in our tradition, in the African tradition, you don't take it literally. It's a chant to motivate people. It was never taken literally.
But there's some dissonance in the South African leadership's message. President Ramaphosa denounced the chant during the Oval Office meeting.
Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament.
So you denounced that type of language in the video that you saw?
Oh yes, we've always done so. As government, as my own party, we are completely opposed to that.
Many Afrikaner supporters say Ramaphosa can't have it both ways. The chant can't be condemnable and harmless at the same time. Yeah, you know, okay, the historical context, whatever, isn't chanting kill whoever kind of just, I don't know, edgy and aggressive sounding, if not an explicit call for violence? Just get a different chant.
For sure, if you don't understand the history and the context of apartheid, kill the Boer is a phrase that's about kill the system of white supremacy over apartheid. And that's what the chant is about, to try to break up that system, not actual farmers. And when we talk about the conversation that Trump and Elon Musk are bringing to the table about this genocide of white people in South Africa, it's just wholly untrue and creating a lie that's perpetuated when actually farm murders in South Africa are rampant because crime is rampant in South Africa, and most of the people that die on farms are black people. And so why are we not also protecting those people when we have conversations and Elon Musk joins the office about people that are dying about crime? Exactly. So we should talk about a crime issue in South Africa, and Trump should try to do something about that instead of providing citizenship to South Africans that are only white because he wants to protect them and not the rest of the people dying in South Africa for the same reason.
Boers are a specific group of people, the Dutch-speaking people of South Africa,
that oppressed people during apartheid, so they want to kill the system of white supremacy. Hundreds of years ago, apartheid ended in the 1990s.
It's when they came here. They've been here.
It's recent, very recent.
So why didn't it say kill the apartheid system then?
Well, it's like no justice, no peace. I don't think that people protesting that actually mean there's never going to be peace.
So if I say kill the Biden family and I chant
that over, kill the Biden family,
kill the Biden family, No, Lindsay, I'm just against the system of government of the Bidens.
People in apartheid
don't like their
killed,
corruption
hurt,
and their policies.
left landless and powerless, and they're saying kill the system that put them in that situation.
Say that kill the system that put them in that situation.
Okay, that doesn't really roll off the tongue as a three-word sentence.
Okay, I don't know. Lefty people just love phrases that conjure up violence against actual people. That's not my problem.
Well, you have to understand the real pain and injustice that came with these chants in the first place. So misrepresenting them is causing revisionist history to run rampant and people actually believing that there are a slew of black people in South Africa that are trying to kill white farmers. That's actually not true. So I just want to report the real news. Yes, crime is bad in South Africa and we should discuss it and have a real conversation about it. But we shouldn't pretend that there is a genocide against white people because there's a party saying kill the Boers. Those same people have there's no video or reports that those same people at the protest movement to end white nationalism in a mostly black country are the same people that are going and killing farmers.
Maybe people
These are just
think
people
there's a
committing
genocide
crime.
because the leaders of this party are chanting, kill these people over and over again.
It's not about
Maybe
what
that's
you
part
think.
of the confusion is
No.
because the slogan of the other group is kill you.
But we're talking about what the facts are. It's not about what you think, and it's about understanding the history there. And if these people are talking about ending an entire oppressive system, that's different than ending the lives of people. And so don't attribute a protest movement with people that are actually killing people, because that's not the case.
Okay,
there are
protest
actual
movements
people that are murderers that should go to jail that have killed people. And that's a crime problem. The same way if we talk about Chicago or New York or D.C., a big city where the murders are happening, they're not representing all people of color, all white people, all Latino people, because it was that person that did the act, right? They're a murderer. But that does not mean that this entire system of protest against a movement that made people die and treated poorly for years under apartheid should be reprimanded because they're trying to still liberate themselves. I mean, there's still a disproportionate amount of people and oppression that happens in South Africa because of the agreements made after apartheid. So people are still suffering and learning how to get along and move forward. But they're not killing white South Africans.
It's
That's
like
not what's
from
happening.
the river to the sea. Well, that means getting rid of Israel completely. Why don't you just have a slogan that's like, Palestinians should be free as well, or Palestinians should have equal rights, and then it's like, no, erase Israel from existence, kill all the Jewish people there.
We could have a nuanced conversation about them changing the
I'm
slogan.
having that nuanced
but I
conversation.
think that
That's what the conversation I want to have.
Right, but the message behind it is one that should be supported, is that people don't want to be oppressed. And so whatever the slogan is, we should be
People
pointing
don't-
that out. And so when
Down with oppression. That's my slogan. Down with oppression.
And so you know what would do us all a
We can
favor?
do down with
If
racist
Elon
oppression.
Musk and President Trump admitted that there was still oppression in South Africa and that crime was rampant,
I
and
thought you
actually
said
tried
everything's
to.
perfect and there's nothing
No,
wrong
I
with
didn't.
South
I said
Africa.
white people are not being killed at a high number.
Oh, okay.
I said that there's no
nothing bad is happening
genocide.
to white people, but still things bad.
Yeah,
happen to
crime's
black
happening
people.
to black and white people is what I'm saying. There's no genocide of one particular race. And so if they paint the picture correctly, then we can have a real conversation when leaders come to the Oval Office and look like a serious government that came there to have serious discussions instead of mocking and finding 3 articles to prove your point and a chant that has nothing to do with the actual killings in the articles. You're conflating 2 issues and making the American public confused that hasn't deeply researched this story.
The political movement, again, is chanting, kill the Boer. How can you
No,
say
it's not
they're
a
in
leader.
good
The
faith?
leader of the political movement was Ramaphosa, who was in the White House Oval Office.
Right, I know that he
he's
didn't
the
say
leader
it.
of the political movement.
Well, he's the leader of the country.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this man is the leader of a political movement. No, he's a
Right.
protester.
But even
he's
is
in a fringe
criticized.
group
I'm not.
that's allowed to
yeah,
protest.
I'm not criticizing the president of South Africa at all. It's fine. But even he criticized the figures who said this.
Because
so if
he's
he did it,
a
can't
party
we?
that's separate from the party that used
Right.
to adopt the
Okay,
slogan.
but aren't we
"Kill the
allowed to
Boer."
criticize the
No, it's like
slogan
a
if he's allowed-
Republican
if
and
he's
a Democrat
criticizing it?
being in office, and then the Republican criticizing what Biden did. He's just saying that Nelson Mandela's government was the same government that accepted the chant "Kill the Boer." I am a different government, and this way I lead is not something that wants to embrace that movement.
that's
and
correct.
so that's
I agree
fine.
with
That's
him.
wholly acceptable. If Trump wants to embrace a movement or doesn't, that's wholly acceptable. That doesn't mean that that movement is actually killing people. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's actually happening. Coming up, a CBS journalist bashing the Trump administration at a commencement speech. We'll dive into that next. CBS News journalist Scott Pelley is going viral for apparently taking some shots at President Trump.
Pelley gave a speech during Wake Forest University's commencement ceremony. Here he is taking some not-so-subtle shots at President Trump and his administration.
In this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes.
SiriusXM host Dean Obadiah wrote on Blue Sky, quote, "In a world of Jake Tappers, be a Scott Pelley. Two journalists, one stood up for freedoms at his own personal expense. The other is seeking to profit off making Trump happy."
Meanwhile, Fox News anchor Laura Ingraham didn't pull any punches. She wrote on X, "Scott Pelley has always been a supercilious specimen, perpetual nose and air syndrome with the 'listen, I'm the anchorman' voice. These guys pretending to be persecuted when they literally don't care. That China is the real force of global domination." Laughable. Let's quickly start with that very gratuitous shot at Jake Tapper that Dean Oba, whatever his name is, took. But Jake Tapper is doing, I'm halfway through the book, it's fantastic. Real journalism. I have criticized Jake Tapper very much over my career, but it's a deeply well-reported book, well-researched book on what a shocking cover-up of Biden's abilities, and that's not real journalism. What Scott Pelley does is real journalism. And by the way, this lecture from Scott Pelley on the erosion of free speech, Scott Pelley's show 60 Minutes has been at the vanguard of the erosion of free speech, lusting after the power the German censorship czars have to confiscate people's social media devices for speaking their mind, for saying contrarian things. And I don't remember CBS doing very many reports on the Biden administration's, the FBI, the CDC, their efforts to censor on social media dissident perspectives. In fact, what I do remember is them parroting the talking points of all of the misinformation cops trying to police social media. So he is not someone who has taken much interest in free speech principles when it was his own ideological team doing all the speech policing. All that said, I've had plenty of criticisms of what Trump has had to do on the free speech topic for the last few weeks. I don't agree with much of the approach to the universities or the approach to mainstream media networks. But I don't think people like Scott Pelley have a leg to stand on.
Well, Scott Pelley is a respected journalist with a really great career of factual reporting. And so is Alex Thompson, the co-author of the book that you are now reading.
Alex Thompson's great. I got no beef with Alex Thompson.
He has spent years covering Biden intentionally and looking into a potential cognitive decline. But there is room to criticize when you put yourself on a public stage and write a book, the same person that wasn't really allowing any criticism to come on his show. So Jake Tapper is the person that probably finds it an ideal time to release a book of this substance because it's convenient. Biden's not in office, and he's going to make a lot of money. And he's just going to piggyback with Alex Thompson, who already did all the research and wrote the book, and then they go into this together and do it for profit. We understand how capitalism works. No problem with writing a book. Happy for you guys. It's a super big success in the book world. However, I think that you can't say that no one's allowed to criticize them. I also think that,
I'm not saying you're allowed to criticize them. I just don't see what there is to criticize in the book. The book itself is pretty good.
No, the book is, as it stands, is a good book. I just think that Jake Tapper jumping on people have raised an eyebrow at, and that's fair, I believe. But I also
keep saying to him, "Where were you?" while conservatives were raising questions about Biden's fitness, and he's kind of just very straightforwardly admitted, "Yeah, I should have been there. I was too. I put too much faith in what Democrats were telling me, and that was a mistake." So, what else can you do? You can either accept that and move on, or you can just be mad about it forever.
And I think Scott Pelley is echoing what journalists feel. Like, freedom of speech is being chipped away in broad daylight. We're suing major media companies because Trump is, and not because they're actually reporting misinformation, because he doesn't like what they're saying. he doesn't like the 60 Minutes. He doesn't like how they're editing. Like, that's not freedom of speech. He's also trying to take all the money out of Harvard University because he doesn't like what they're standing
but again,
for.
where
he
were
doesn't
they
like the
when
wokeness.
Where were they
and so
when
these
the
are just
government did that to
vendettas,
social
and
media
these are not
companies?
actually these are vendettas that Trump is having, and we are cowering by bending down and paying out settlements and having anchors who were reporting the facts in the news apologize to him publicly. It's kind of like this feels like a dictatorship. That's not how free press works.
Was it not a vendetta when the heads of social media companies were dragged before Congress and screamed at frankly, by Democrats and Republicans for misinformation, for speech, for allowing free speech on their platform? And journalists didn't care. No, the mainstream media was cheering the Congress for doing that. They were on the side of the state. They don't care about free speech, or they didn't evince any interest in free speech when it was their perceived ideological enemies were the ones being censored. So it's totally selective. Now they're under the microscope. They're the ones whose speech is being attacked, and it is being attacked, and I don't agree with it. I'm against it. I'm totally opposed to it. I don't think Trump should be suing the networks that he's suing, and I think while it's fine to not, to redirect public funding away from Harvard, Harvard is not entitled to U.S. taxpayer dollars. That's not a free speech issue. It's our money.
Well,
the government can decide not to.
What initiated it was Trump's dislike for their free speech over there.
Yes, and I also should not be punishing them for allowing protests or whatever it is they're doing. I also don't have any desire to stop them from enrolling as a class, as a category, foreign students. We can say that they can't enroll people with ties to crime or terror. There can be some vetting, and there is vetting, and I'm saying I'm against it, but again,
it's
they
setting
don't
a
care
dangerous
when Democrats
precedent
do it.
to
They
settle
don't care.
because of business needs for the parent company, a paramount interest, as opposed to CBS. It needs to operate in isolation as an independent news company so that it can actually report the news and people.
Then we need to abolish the FTC and the FCC.
Well, I just feel like
then there needs to be no
Trump
government
shouldn't be
oversight.
the FCC. Trump shouldn't be the person.
He appoints the people in charge.
Yeah, but he
It's the
shouldn't be
same.
the person saying, "I don't like this."
Trump
let's
is
take
just
it off."
making more obvious the way it has always been, because Trump says and explains his rationale, which is, I don't like you and I'm going to use the law to hurt you. This is exactly what was going on with previous administrations.
So what happens when he does this during
bureaucratically.
election season? It's like, okay, well, I'm suing you. You can't report the actual facts that I might be losing the race or that my counterpart might be losing the race. This is a slippery slope. I think we both agree that there needs to be space for people to voice opinions and thoughts and provide context around those, especially.
That would be horrifying. Wouldn't it be horrifying if an agency that is aligned against a presidential candidate intervened to warn a large social media company to take down damaging information about the family of the other candidate? Oh wait, that happened. It was called the Hunter Biden laptop, and it was perpetrated by the FBI.
We're at time, but I have many more things to say.
Up next, in a surprising move to some, Trump is set to pardon Chrisleys Knows Best. Did I say that right? Chrisleys Knows Best? I don't know who this person is. Chrisleys, reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisleys. We will discuss that next. Trump says that he is set to pardon reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisleys in prison for tax evasion. Their daughter Savannah got a surprise call yesterday from the president with this news.
Your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope we can do it by tomorrow. Is that okay? We'll try getting it done tomorrow. So
wonderful.
Give them, I don't know them, but give them my regards and wish them a good life. Congratulate your parents.
Congratulations, Savannah.
And Alice had a lot to do with this, and just congratulate your parents. And I hear they're terrific people. This should not have happened. So, and you just take care. Boy, they have good children. You're no longer children, but I'll say it anyway. They have good children, don't they, huh?
The couple became famous for their show Chrisleys Knows Best on the USA Network. In 2022, they were sentenced to a combined 19 years in prison for bank fraud and tax evasion. They were also ordered to pay $17.8 million in restitution.
The news comes after Savannah Chrisleys spoke at the 2024 Republican National Convention and called on the Trump administration to pardon her parents. Meanwhile, Trump says he will also be pardoning former Virginia Sheriff Scott Jenkins, who was convicted by a jury of federal fraud and bribery charges. Social media users are applauding the Chrisleys pardons. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene writes, "Amazing."
Others aren't as enthusiastic. Republicans against Trump writes, quote, "Another corrupt pardon." Well, this is the trend. If it has to do with shady financial dealings, just know Trump is your guy. He's going to pardon you. That is the trend that we have, as we just named 2 in a row. He doesn't feel like that's a crime. He doesn't really abide by financial laws himself. He likes to file for bankruptcy, even though he has tons of shady financial dealings across the world now while he's president, but likes to absolve himself from those things. And so I think that this has just officially become what it should be expected from the president, even reaching across the aisle and doing it with Eric Adams and saying, look, if you took some money, had a lavish trip, don't worry about it, I got your back. Whoever does that, he understands.
I guess I just have a different view of these kinds of things than maybe you do, and definitely than Niall does. I think he and I have had some of our most contentious arguments about pardon-related things. If they're guilty of tax evasion and fraud, they should have to pay back the money and a penalty and maybe some light prison fee. I don't really think you should spend 12 years in prison for only financial crimes. I mean, you should have to pay a penalty and some amount of jail time, but I don't, for me, prison is for to keep us safe from violent people or people who have some proclivity toward future violence or future criminal behavior that is extreme. I guess I don't care if they sit in prison for 12 years. That's a long time.
I hear you. I think violent criminals should definitely be in prison, but this couple was parading around Atlanta.
I think if you stab someone, you should be in prison
for sure. I agree with that. And right? I think there's levels. They definitely should pay it back. By being pardoned, they're going to be absolved of having to pay that back, which is also problematic. They were parading around Atlanta, living a lavish lifestyle like real estate moguls on their television show.
And that living a lavish lifestyle is not a crime.
No, but basically that money came from defrauding banks and tax evasion. They submitted false bank statements and spent the money on luxury cars, designer bags, real estate, and travel instead of real things. Well, let me finish. Mind you, 569 different individuals are now in jail because they spent an average of 3 years after defrauding the COVID loans that you can take. And so these everyday people have to face jail time because their kid can't have access to Trump and campaign for him and then get a favor. We should let 569 people out of jail if they are getting this favor extended because they're friends of Trump or because their daughter ran around campaigning for Trump during the season. I would agree with that.
Your terms are acceptable. Maybe those people should probably be let go. Again, I would not. I think they should pay back money to. You can't defraud someone and just get away with it. They owe not to society, to the bank. In terms of the bank fraud, in terms of the tax evasion, you have to pay your taxes. It's a pain, and the tax system is really complicated. And
Wesley Snipes went to jail for it. Chrisleys knows best can go to jail for it.
Well, but again, I'm pretty sympathetic.
I want to be equal, and
I want it to be equal too, but I'm pretty sympathetic to people who get ensnared in this kind of things. We should briefly touch on the sheriff. That's a little bit different. He's a public official, and I have a much higher threshold of you should. Public corruption for a public official is very bad.
He was accepting $75,000 in bribes for positions.
Well, the government framed it as bribes. The position was basically an unofficial deputy type thing that will allow you to own a gun. And his argument was this is getting around draconian gun control laws by I'm deputizing. This allows people to own guns. Now, he should not. The government claims that he submitted evidence that he had accepted payments in exchange for that. He said the payments were not explicitly in exchange for that. Looks a little bit complicated. I'm more persuaded on that one that a pardon was not appropriate, but his defense was that he was trying to allow people to exercise their Second Amendment rights, which I support doing, and that he says evidence of his innocence was suppressed. I have no idea whether that's the case or not, but that is the argument.
And he's down with the pay-to-play strategy, and so is Trump. He's taking Qatar jets.
I mean, the play was you have gun rights now, which is a play, I think.
The play is cash for badges, right? He's like, give me a cash, you have access. And I think, that's never a good strategy when we're talking about government officials. Chrisleys knows best. We can have more of a debate about what they owe back to these banks. But when somebody's a police officer, when somebody's a sheriff, when somebody is a president, we just want you to hold yourself to a decent standard like you hold the people to. Otherwise, let everyone free that's done similar crimes.
That's fine. But we lock people up for so long. That's a long time in prison. That also costs us money. The cost of incarcerating people who are not going to be out there killing people. If they're going to be out there killing people, yes, then we have to incarcerate them to keep our country safe. But it costs a lot of money to keep people locked up.
But we want people to pay back their student loans.
Yeah.
We need people to pay back money they stole from banks and
yes,
the tax system.
I agree. They got to pay the money back for sure.
Okay. Coming up, comedian Jon Stewart went scorched earth on his own boss, Paramount Global Chair Sherry Redstone. Hear what he had to say next. Jon Stewart has some choice words for his boss, Sherry Redstone. The comedian is putting Paramount Global Chair on blast for capitulating to President Trump. Let's watch.
What you're seeing now is all must pay tribute to the king. And the price of that, the price of peace is different. The guy from 60 Minutes and the reason why the head of CBS News left is it's not even about the money.
Writer President Trump is suing CBS for $20 billion over their 60-minute interview with Kamala Harris. He says the interview was deceitfully edited. CBS has denied that, but the fallout led veteran 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens to resign, and CBS president and CEO Wendy McMahon has also stepped down.
It's important to note that Stewart's Comedy Central is owned by Paramount. His comments come as Redstone is looking to advance an $8 billion merger with Skydance Media. Well, Redstone also stands to personally gain $2 billion herself if the Skydance merger goes through. So that's a big incentive to get this solved. But I also think when media executives prioritize their shareholder values over the press freedom, then that becomes problematic and we lose access to what we know as honest reporting. And so we want to make sure that we're getting that, especially from institutions that have been around all these years and have done a good job, which I believe they have, 60 Minutes, of doing things like this. And so when you pay President Trump because he doesn't like what you said, as opposed to actually providing false information to your viewers, I think you're setting a precedent that basically anything goes, and if we don't make him happy, then we don't get anything else. And the businesses should be separate. Like, free press should be separate from anything else that is happening with the Skydance merger.
I mean, I see it a little differently. Journalism is a business, like it or not, if that's your model. Some journalistic institutions have different funding models. You can have advertising as your funding model. You can be donor driven if you're a nonprofit. You can be subscriber driven if you're one of the new Patreon or Substack or something like that. If you work for a large media company, you're largely advertiser driven, and yes, you have to serve your shareholders. I mean, look, I agree that can cause some awkwardness, especially if you're a large media company with a bunch of different properties, right? They're trying to prioritize this merger a little bit at the sacrifice of the news product, because the news product is not exactly what they value, and maybe that's a shame. I do think this is, it's a bit rich to hear them say that this is just trying to keep our journalism objective. I don't think their journalism was objective. I think their journalism, I agree with Trump that it was somewhat at least deceitful, maybe not to the extent he's making it out to be, the editing of that interview. I also don't really think it mattered in terms of the election all that much. So the election interference claim is, again, sensational. And I don't think you should sue them. I think they have the right to put out dishonest, one would even say misinformation. I don't think
we need to clarify for anyone who doesn't know, the dishonesty that he's talking about is taking out and a pause break in Kamala's answer.
They condensed how quickly she responded to a question.
So that changed her entire answer, which you thought was trash anyway.
It's misinformation.
That's not misinformation. That's cutting out a breath. Because you know how shows work?
When I was told, well, we didn't fully explain the context, given why Biden randomly wandered off, it was misinformation. That's what I was told. It's misinformation because we didn't have all of the context available in that one video clip of him wandering off.
Is it worth
okay, that's misinformation. But it's not misinformation when we get rid of all the context for Kamala Harris not being able to come up with that answer quick enough. Again, these are value judgments that people disagree over. There's no objective. These cases are not objective fact or objective falsehood. There's room for interpretation and debate.
For sure,
and I think they're allowed to do that. Again, I don't think the government or Trump personally should swoop in and prohibit it.
Like he's doing with NPR as well, government funded.
Well, they don't have a right to government. They don't have a right to government funding.
Yeah, people want access to fair reporting. Which, come on, PBS is pretty down the middle, straightforward. What are we talking about?
I would cancel the funding for PBS.
They do
NPR
find your roots.
Immediately.
You're so annoyed by their reporting about finding people's roots. They do holistic, interesting programming that shows both sides.
It's not something the government has any reason funding.
Well, if you think that private institutions lean on commercials and advertisers and have other mixed interests that may get in the way of what CBS is trying to do, like we're seeing in this instant with Sherry Redstone, well, then PBS and NPR are alternatives to that, funded by the government that actually.
You think that doesn't create any conflicts of interest? You're seeing it right now. The government comes after them.
Because he doesn't like what they say, not because what they say is untrue.
No,
and that's the problem.
No, it's both. I would absolutely get rid of those things very, very rapidly. That does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content, which is coming your way today. And you can be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. And we will see you back here tomorrow, because it's not Thursday yet. Tomorrow's Thursday.
It's not. I don't know what day it is.
See you then.